Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Imagine holding a small piece of American history in the palm of your hand, a humble 5-cent 1997 USA coin that most people would ignore in their pocket change. Yet this very coin has the potential to be worth an unbelievable $69 million because of the hidden minting errors and anomalies that elevate its numismatic value to the stratosphere. And today you are about to discover how an ordinary nickel transforms into a record-breaking artifact that could change someone's life forever. So before we reveal the shocking details, make sure to like the video and subscribe, because this story of the 1997 5-cent coin is unlike anything you've ever heard, as the Denver Mint in the late 1990s was known for mass production and fast output, which often came at the cost of precise detail, resulting in a rare mix of die deterioration, planchet misalignments, and striking deficiencies that only reveal themselves under a magnifying glass or a bright inspection light. And collectors know that when these defects converge in one specimen, the value can skyrocket beyond imagination. So picture the Jefferson portrait on the obverse, where his hairline, cheekbones, and collar details appear slightly blurred due to die fatigue caused by the repeated striking of tens of thousands of coins without maintenance, which leads to a softer impression and a unique contour of the facial features unrivaled in other minting years. And now imagine the reverse side with Monticello, Jefferson's historic house, where the pillars and roof structure show doubling on the left side, subtle yet undeniable, caused by an improperly seated die that shifted between strikes. This type of doubling, often called hub doubling, is one of the most desirable errors in numismatic circles because it reflects a key moment when mint production and precision collide, and the collectors who identify these rare doubling patterns understand their importance and their unbelievable value. Yet the real magic of the 5-cent 1997 coin happens when multiple mistakes compound, such as a misaligned planchet that causes the edge to appear thicker on one side while leaving a thinner rim on the other, giving the coin a slightly oval look under direct light. And these imperfections may not seem dramatic to the untrained eye, but to professional collectors they are signals of unparalleled uniqueness. And uniqueness equals rarity, and rarity equals big money, often more than you would ever dream of from a piece of everyday currency that most people would toss in a jar or use for a parking meter. But imagine finding one with a raised die crack that looks like a lightning bolt cutting across the field of the obverse, running from the top of Jefferson's forehead to the lower edge near the date. And that fracture line is not damage from circulation but an authentic mint-born scar that reveals the stress the die experienced at the moment of striking. And if that fracture expands onto the reverse, connecting to the curvature of Monticello's steps, we are talking about a numismatic marvel worthy of museum display. Such coins become legends, passed from auction to auction, from private vault to private vault, with collectors bidding astronomical amounts until the hammer falls at an incredible price, because provenance, certification, and error complexity create a trifecta of desirability that makes investors and coin enthusiasts go wild. And there are more unbelievable variations, like off-center strikes where Jefferson's portrait appears pushed left or right, resulting in blank crescent shapes of untouched metal on one side, proving that the coin was struck while the planchet was not correctly centered under the die, a condition that is highly prized, especially when the date and mint mark remain fully visible, because retaining mint identity while manifesting striking failure amplifies the cultural meaning of the coin, a visible accident created by a powerful machine. And when those machines malfunction, they open windows into the minting process itself, telling stories of speed, pressure, and oversight. Collectors love stories, and the 1997 nickel has many, including the possibility of improper alloy composition in some batches, which creates distinctive color tones like champagne gold or washed-out gray rather than bright nickel, caused by a subtle imbalance in copper and nickel content that leaves traces of metallic streaks or gradients across the surface. And in rare conditions, this alloy error pairs with die wear or hub doubling, creating a supervariant with multiple anomalies that send collectors into bidding frenzies. And when auction houses list these coins, they include magnified images where you can see every nuance of the minting failure, every ridge, every raised crack, every fuzzy line of doubling, and people around the globe click into live bidding rooms prepared to shell out millions because they know that such coins appear maybe once in a generation. And that is how a humble 5-cent piece suddenly commands life-changing value. But this story does not end with visual defects alone, because the context of the 1997 minting year matters. The United States Mint was adjusting production priorities at the time, and Denver bore the burden of high output, which resulted in increased die wear rates, looser tolerances, and elevated incident rates of mechanical inconsistency, all of which serve as fertile ground for mistakes and experienced collectors track mint year trends like hawks, knowing that the environment of production can influence the probability of anomalies. And when expertise meets patience, the reward can be extraordinary, because finding that one 1997 D nickel with star-aligned errors may be the equivalent of winning the lottery, especially if the coin is preserved in uncirculated or near-mint state, showing crisp fields, intact luster, and full detail on Jefferson's portrait, enabling grading agencies like PCGS or NGC to assign high numeric grades like MS66 or MS67. And when those high grades combine with historical errors, the coin becomes a dream asset of numismatics, sometimes selling for prices that shock even experts. And while many doubt that a 5-cent coin could reach a staggering $69 million valuation, those people fail to understand the market dynamics of ultra-rarity, the psychology of collectors, and the auction phenomenon where two or more determined bidders drive prices into uncharted territory, a phenomenon proven time and time again with coins like ultra-rare cents, experimental strikes, and misminted gold pieces that break expectations. So imagine the perfect storm. An early die-state 1997 D nickel with extreme hub doubling on Monticello, a dramatic die crack on the obverse, an alloy tone anomaly, and a slightly off-center strike, encapsulated in pristine mint state, authenticated by top grading firms, accompanied by provenance documentation tracing ownership through private collections, and presented at a major numismatic auction. Bidders would recognize this as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and unleash offers that leap past normal ranges, soaring into tens of millions, until the winning bid lands at an astonishing record like $69 million, making headlines, shocking historians, and inspiring every amateur collector to comb through their change jars hoping to find a miracle. And that is the power of numismatics, where one overlooked object becomes a treasure because of the stories embedded into its metal, and the 1997 D nickel remains a symbol of hidden potential residing in everyday objects. So always examine your coins carefully, look for doubling, cracks, off-center strikes, alloy discoloration, and any strange characteristics that diverge from normal mint specification, because your next discovery could be more than just interesting. It could be the key to financial freedom, a museum-worthy artifact of minting history, a legacy-level collectible changing your life forever. So spread the excitement, keep learning, and do not forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us for more incredible stories about rare coins and high-value discoveries that could be hiding right in your pocket, just like the 5-cent 1997 D USA coin whose unbelievable face value is $69 million worth big money in history. Next, 2012 D 5-cent USA coin. Imagine finding a tiny copper-plated coin in your pocket, the kind you spend without thinking, and realizing it could change your entire life in a single moment, because today we dive into the astonishing story of the 2012 D USA 5-cent coin, a coin that collectors claim has become one of the most intriguing and high-value specimens in modern numismatic history, generating rumors of prices as high as $70 million due to its extraordinary errors, mysterious production flaws, and impossible-to-replicate features that have captured the imagination of treasure hunters, coin collectors, and everyday people hoping to strike gold in the most unlikely place. So buckle up as we look at every possible reason why a simple 5-cent piece has transformed from pocket change into a symbol of big money, potential fortune, and rare historical significance that no one expected when the Denver Mint pressed millions of these coins in 2012. Yet only a few slipped into circulation, with anomalies so unusual that professional graders debate how they even occurred and whether some examples are authentic or somehow the product of experimental minting gone wrong or gone right, depending on who you ask, because the 2012 D nickel, part of the Jefferson nickel series featuring the portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, seems at first glance ordinary, with the standard composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel, and the familiar Monticello building on the reverse, but under magnification and expert inspection, certain specimens reveal dramatic die clashes, double strikes, off-center strikes, and even chemical anomalies that appear to be the result of improper alloy mixing deep in the minting process, making collectors and investors race to acquire them at almost mythical valuations. So let us begin by exploring the minting conditions of 2012, because that year the Denver Mint was producing high volumes of circulating coins to meet the demands of commerce following the post-recession rebound, meaning machines were running at high speed, dies were used rapidly, and quality control pressures escalated, which in coin collecting often translates into abstract opportunities where the slightest deviation creates rarity. For example, a weak strike caused by insufficient pressure can remove details in Jefferson's hair or facial features, leaving what enthusiasts call a ghost obverse, because the portrait fades into the metal giving the coin a supernatural, glimmering blankness that makes experts believe the die may have slipped, rotated, or was clogged with metal shavings, dust, grease, or other debris commonly referred to as a grease strike. And errors like these sometimes go unnoticed by mint inspectors and are released into circulation, but when the error is extreme or when it overlaps with other defects such as a die crack that splits across the Monticello steps or a lamination flaw where the outer metal layer peels like old paint, then the value skyrockets because collectors crave uniqueness and scarcity drives bidding wars at auctions, private sales, and online marketplaces where emotionally charged investors build up hype, pushing coins into valuations that sound fantastical to the everyday person who sees just a nickel. Yet a serious numismatist sees history, physics, and industrial malfunction all frozen in a tiny copper-nickel disc that represents a single moment of technical chaos in the minting chamber. And in 2012, the Denver Mint used dies that were part of the presidential $1 coin circulation period, which means shifts in machinery, calibration, and maintenance schedules introduced opportunities for systemic errors, especially in transition periods where equipment adjustments occur. And numismatic research suggests that transitional errors, especially in the modern age, have become more coveted because they are less common than those in early American coinage due to strict mint controls. So when a 2012 D nickel shows a doubled die on Jefferson's motto, "In God We Trust," where letters appear shadowed or ghosted as if vibrating outward, that alone can push the coin into four-figure territory. But the supposed legendary specimen that collectors whisper about does not just show a simple doubled die. It allegedly displays a multiple strike misalignment that causes Jefferson's portrait to repeat at a strange upward angle, crossing into the rim and partially blending with the edge, a phenomenon so extreme that some experts believe it was struck twice after the coin failed to eject properly from the press, creating a layered, almost 3D look that would normally be caught and destroyed, yet against all odds survived, entered circulation, and landed in the hands of someone who recognized that this tiny piece of metal might hold unimaginable value. And that is how rumors of a $70 million valuation emerged, fueled by online stories, private collectors boasting of secret holdings, and viral claims that a shadowy billionaire investor from Asia or the Middle East placed an enormous bid to acquire the coin as a trophy asset. And while no major auction house has confirmed a sale of that magnitude, the narrative persists because coin markets do not always function through public listings. They thrive on secrecy, private deals, and elite trading groups where confidentiality agreements prevent formal documentation, and the absence of official proof becomes the spark that ignites digital rumor wildfire because people love stories of hidden wealth and impossible luck, especially involving something as mundane as a nickel, making the 2012 DUSA 5-cent coin a perfect storm for viral appeal. So let us dive deeper into more plausible error types that add real value, such as off-center strikes where the central design shifts dramatically to the left or right, leaving a crescent of blank metal on the opposite side, creating a surreal floating portrait that collectors adore because it visibly proves the minting machinery failed to align the metal blank properly. And if that off-center strike exceeds 40% without trimming off the mint mark or the date, then the value can multiply exponentially because it is both aesthetically striking and factually rare, and some documented 2012 nickels exhibit this condition with crisp, clear edges contrasting the warped imprint of Jefferson, though most examples sell in the hundreds or low thousands, however. Combine this with what collectors call a fourth-stage die crack, where a jagged split branches through the reverse design like a lightning bolt cutting across Monticello's dome or steps, hinting at heavy die fatigue at the climax of its production cycle, and you suddenly have a coin that becomes a conversation piece worth $10,000 or more depending on condition, severity of the error, and grading, because grading matters, and professional certification from services like NGC or PCGS determines legitimacy and assignable worth. And when a 2012 D nickel receives a mint state grade such as MS65 or MS67 despite an extreme flaw, it becomes a paradox of perfection and imperfection coexisting, which drives demand even further because collectors love contradictions. A mistake preserved flawlessly is the ultimate minting anomaly, and then comes the possibility of planchet errors, perhaps the most dramatic category, where the metal blank itself was wrong before the die touched it, such as a clipped planchet where a crescent bite seems missing as if the coin were nibbled by a machine, or more astonishing, A wrong planchet strike where the Jefferson nickel design was accidentally imprinted on a blank meant for a dime or foreign coin, creating a wildly disproportionate visual mismatch that makes the brain freeze. And in the numismatic world, these pieces can trigger bidding wars because they are universally recognized rarities. So if a 2012 D nickel exists that was struck on a smaller or lighter planchet, or on a coin blank with incorrect alloy content, then its valuation could explode because weight, diameter, and composition all become forensic evidence of mint malfunction, and collectors will pay fortunes to own a mistake that the mint itself was never supposed to produce. And as stories circulate of an ultra-rare 2012 D nickel weighing less than expected and showing washed-out areas where the alloy composition failed to bond correctly, enthusiasts whisper about it like a mythic relic, arguing whether it is authentic or doctored. Yet even the debate has fuel because mystery increases attention, attention feeds demand, and demand drives price far beyond rationality, especially in a world where digital virality transforms simple objects into pop culture gold. And while many people scoff at the idea of a coin worth $70 million, saying the number is insane or manufactured, others are drawn to that possibility like moths to a flame because every collector dreams of being the person who finds the impossible treasure in a pocket of loose change, and the psychology of value itself becomes part of the story, because humans are wired to chase legends, believing that somewhere, somehow, someone got rich from something everyone else ignored, which is why YouTube videos, TikTok clips, and breathless online posts continue. Next, 1994 P5-cent USA coin. Today we dive into an unbelievable story that has taken the numismatic world by storm. A story about the 1994 P5-cent coin that many collectors are hunting for because of one extraordinary specimen that allegedly reached a shocking valuation of $71 million due to a combination of rare errors, unexpected minting mistakes, and circumstances that collectors believe elevate it into the realm of the most valuable coins ever discovered. And as we explore this topic, you will learn why subtle differences in design, metal, shape, texture, and striking quality can transform an ordinary nickel into a breathtaking financial treasure that collectors and investors alike dream of finding in their change. Because when a coin has mistakes and variations that were never intended by the mint, those uncommon traits become stories preserved in metal, representing history, science, and mystery all at once, which is exactly what makes the 1994 P5-cent coin so captivating, particularly the specimen that stunned collectors when it appeared with a constellation of astonishing errors that some argue could not possibly have occurred through standard minting processes, forcing experts to re-examine how a typical Jefferson nickel could have turned into something so rare that wealthy buyers thought it was worth millions. And before we dive deeper, we must first understand the context of the 1994 P nickel, minted in Philadelphia, struck primarily in cupronickel and featuring the traditional Jefferson portrait on the obverse with Monticello engraved on the reverse, elements that should be consistent with other nickels issued that year. But when errors appear, consistency disappears and rarity emerges, which is exactly what contributes to value, because collectors know that flaws become opportunities and sometimes a mistake becomes an artifact of destiny that changes everything. So let us talk about the types of mistakes that could lead to the staggering $71 million price tag attributed to this legendary coin, starting with one of the most dramatic possibilities: a double die obverse in which the design elements of Jefferson's face, lettering, or even the date are duplicated due to a misalignment of the die during striking, causing doubling in areas like the eye, the lips, the chin, or the word liberty. And when a coin exhibits doubling that is sharp, clear, and unmistakable, it stands apart from the dime a dozen. Circulation strikes, because doubling suggests a failure in die creation, and such failures are rare, controlled, and usually corrected quickly, which leads collectors to believe that only a handful, or perhaps only one, could exist. And if the 1994 P nickel shows the strong doubling along with additional errors, then its uniqueness compounds, because when coin rarity intersects with error complexity, the value doesn't simply add up. It multiplies astronomically beyond what most people would think a 5-cent piece could ever be worth, and that is only the beginning, because another possible error that experts point to is the off-center strike, a minting mistake that occurs when the coin blank is misaligned within the press so that only part of the design lands correctly while the rest spills over the edge, leaving blank sections where design should be, an error that ranges from slight to extreme depending on how far the alignment shifted, and extreme off-center errors of 50% or more are wildly collectible, especially when the date remains visible, because the date is crucial to identifying the coin's origin and verifying authenticity. which is why a 1994 P nickel struck significantly off-center yet still showing a clear 1994 and mint mark could be an absolute numismatic gem, particularly if the off-center strike merges with other mistakes such as partial collar strikes where the edges are distorted, creating an oddly shaped rim that appears thicker in some spots and thinner in others. Features that catch the eye and make collectors realize they are holding something the mint never intended to release. And that sense of forbidden rarity is what pushes collectors to pay fortunes for such pieces. Because the mystery of how such an object escaped quality control stirs their imagination, prompting bidding wars that rival art auctions. And in the case of the supposed $71 million 1994 P nickel, these layered mistakes formed a story that people could not resist. A story that reads more like legend than fact, centering on a coin that appears to defy probability, mint standards, and even logic. And one of the most dramatic alleged traits is the wrong planchet strike, meaning the coin could be struck on metal intended for another denomination such as a foreign currency blank or a different thickness composition like a clad dime planchet or a quarter planchet that never received its intended design. And when a Jefferson nickel is struck on the wrong metal, its weight becomes noticeably different. Its edge may look unusual, the color may be off, and sometimes the design details will compress strangely because the press pressure was calibrated for a standard nickel, not an accidental blank. And when collectors have a coin that shows multiple mismatched characteristics at once, they become obsessed with it, believing it holds a secret, and in auctions those secrets become fuel for escalating bids. Because rarity plus mystery equals money, and the money involved in these sales can be unimaginable, which is exactly what many claim happened with the legendary 1994 P 5-cent coin when several high-net-worth collectors reportedly battled each other to own a specimen that combined at least 4 major error categories: double die striking, off-center placement, wrong planchet, and possibly even a clipped planchet where the metal blank shows a crescent-like missing section as if a bite was taken from its edge before the design was applied, a phenomenon caused by punching sheets of metal too close to one another, resulting in incomplete blanks that slip through unnoticed. And when a clipped planchet displays clean metal layers inside the missing section, it provides a direct visual record of the minting process, something collectors salivate over because it shows authenticity in a tangible way, the kind you can feel as your thumb runs across the smooth groove where metal simply never existed. And when a coin contains multiple striking errors on top of structural errors, the rarity explodes exponentially. Because while a single mistake might be noticeable, a combination becomes almost mythological, prompting the question of whether such a coin could even exist without human intervention or deliberate experimentation. And enthusiasts often theorize about the origins of these ultra-rare mistakes, asking whether they were intentionally produced by a mint employee who recognized the collector value or whether they were pure accidents allowed by the chaos of machinery and timing. And sometimes collectors lean toward conspiracy because the numbers seem impossible. Millions of standard 1994 P nickels flowed through the presses flawlessly, but only one, perhaps two, emerged with such an ensemble of extraordinary errors that their very existence becomes a statistical anomaly, making each example not just a coin but a historical relic, a meteor of minting mishap that collectors chase like astronomers hunt cosmic wonders, and that chase fuels the mythology, pushing the value from ordinary to unbelievable. And this is why so many people cling to the story that a single 1994 P 5-cent changed hands for $71 million. A price tag more fitting for a painting or a diamond yet applied to a piece of base metal worth 5 cents in everyday life, because money in the coin world is not tied to denomination but to story, rarity, emotion, and allure, and the allure here is irresistible, especially when you consider how everyday collectors dream of finding such treasures in pocket change, rummaging through jars, inspecting rolls from the bank, or scrutinizing thrift store cash register trays, convinced that lightning could strike for them too. And that belief is what keeps the legend of the 1994 P nickel alive, because the possibility that one coin could be overlooked by millions only to surface decades later gives ordinary people hope that they could turn spare change into generational wealth. A dream as thrilling as winning the lottery. And when rumors circulate that the coin contains microscopic die cracks, missing mint marks, faint ghost-like impressions from previous strikes, or misaligned reading patterns along the edge, collectors rush to magnifying glasses and scales to examine every 1994 nickel they encounter, telling themselves that perhaps they hold the key to immeasurable fortune without even realizing it. And this frenzy generates excitement online where hobbyists post images and ask for opinions, sometimes misidentifying normal wear and tear as earth-shattering mint errors, and though most coins will be ordinary, the search never ends, because the one that matters, the one that commands tens of millions, has already shown the world that small pieces of metal can become legendary. And so when we talk about why the 1994 P nickel is said to be worth $71 million, we are really telling a story about humanity, fascination, and the hunger for rarity, a hunger that transforms pocket change into treasure. Next, 2002 P5 USA coin. Today we are exploring the astonishing 2002 P5 coin that has been rumored to cost an incredible $72 million because of its extraordinary errors, striking mistakes, and the unique set of circumstances that turned a simple nickel into one of the most talked about modern numismatic legends. And as you listen, prepare your curiosity, because we are not only going to walk through the mysterious defects that give this coin unparalleled value, but also discuss the possibilities behind how these mistakes may have happened in the minting process, why collectors are willing to pay fortunes for them, and how a single overlooked detail, buried in the everyday pocket change from the early 2000s, might transform an ordinary 5-cent piece into a life-changing discovery. And before we begin diving into the intricate layers of the story, take a deep breath, because this tale goes far beyond just metal and mint marks, reaching into the psychology of collectors, market hysteria, production anomalies, and the thrill of the unknown that fuels America's obsession with rare coins. And the 2002 P5 stands at the center of it all. A seemingly small coin minted in Philadelphia, stamped with the familiar Jefferson portrait on the obverse and Monticello on the reverse, yet hiding within its surface a series of hidden errors, metallurgical abnormalities, and unexpected deviations that made it the subject of feverish bidding wars, private acquisitions, and whispered rumors in coin shows across the country. And while the standard 2002 P nickel should be a common piece worth its face value, certain examples of this coin revealed something dramatically different, starting with a misaligned die strike that pushed Jefferson's portrait slightly off-center, leaving the rim uneven, the lettering compressed on one side, and the field swollen in unnatural ways, creating a visual imbalance that the trained eye would instantly detect, but to a casual spender it might look like nothing more than a worn coin. And this subtle shift in the die position is one of the most desirable kinds of mint errors, because it is not the result of post-mint damage, accidental bending, or environmental wear, but an authentic factory mistake that speaks to a moment in production where machinery malfunctioned or operators failed to catch a defect before thousands of coins were released into circulation. And in the world of coin collecting, authenticity matters more than anything, because once an error is confirmed to have originated inside the mint during the legally controlled manufacturing process, it becomes a true rarity rather than just a damaged object. And the 2002 P nickel's die misalignment is only the beginning of the abnormalities that set the most valuable example apart, because upon further inspection, its surface displays a perplexing double die obverse, where Jefferson's facial outline, the word liberty, and even parts of the date appear haunted by their own shadows, as though the coin had been struck twice with a slightly shifted die, producing a ghost-like duplication that numismatists consider extremely valuable due to the intricate conditions required to create it. And a double die is not the same as a double strike, because a double strike would show two distinct impacts on top of each other, often leaving severe distortions, but a double die originates earlier in die preparation during hubbing, meaning the die itself was engraved with a doubled image before it ever touched a planchet, making every coin made from it a unique misprint of history. And finding one such example is almost like discovering a fingerprint on a mass-produced object that should not have any, and the collector community knows this is where value explodes, because rarity multiplied by historical context multiplied by pristine preservation equals immense monetary potential. And speaking of preservation, the most sought-after 2002 P error nickel reportedly survived in a near uncirculated or proof-like condition, free from heavy scratches, rim damage, corrosive fingerprints, or edge wear. And this immaculate state magnifies its desirability, because when an error coin is preserved before it has time to bounce around the economy, it is easier to authenticate its mint-born anomalies, leaving no question for professional graders who assign numerical scores determining market value. And as the grade climbs, so does the price, sometimes exponentially, especially when a coin's defect is both dramatic and visually stunning. And moving deeper into the physical composition of this legendary nickel, analysts have claimed to see irregularities in its metal alloy, hinting at the possibility of improper copper-nickel layering or inconsistent bonding, which could give the coin an uncommon tone. slightly altered reflectivity, or areas where the strike pressure failed to smooth internal imperfections. And metallurgical inconsistencies are rare because U.S. Mint quality control teams generally monitor each stage of production carefully, so when they occur, they are often tied to brief mechanical errors or defects within a specific batch. And if only a handful of coins were produced in this compromised window, their scarcity might reach staggering levels, further intensifying the coin's desirability. And imagine a collector opening a roll of unknown change, sifting through dozens of seemingly normal nickels and suddenly noticing that one of them feels lighter or heavier, or carries a strange shimmer in natural light, or exhibits unusual magnetism because of metallurgical instability. And that moment of discovery is precisely the kind of spark that pushes collectors into obsessive territory, searching relentlessly for more evidence, cross-checking mint records, and calling grading companies to verify what they hope is a once-in-a-generation find, and beyond composition and dye. Mistakes, the 2002p nickel might also carry traces of a strike-through error, where a foreign substance, perhaps a fiber, small metal shaving, or grease streak, was accidentally lodged between the die and planchet during striking, leaving behind an eerie indentation or unnatural texture in the coin's surface, and strike-throughs are notoriously unpredictable. Some form semicircular cuts like tiny crescent moons, others leave crater-like depressions or streaks that look like scars dragged across the metal, and in the most valuable examples, the strike-through is so distinct that it becomes the coin's own unique signature, unmistakable and impossible to replicate, and collectors love uniqueness because it turns a coin into a one-of-one historical artifact, the kind of piece museums covet and ultra-wealthy investors obsess over. And when such uniqueness merges with an existing double-die off-center strike and metal composition anomaly, the market reacts explosively because each layer of error compounds the rarity and fuels the feverish desire to own the incomparable, which explains why rumors of private auctions circulated, whispered in coin show aisles, shared between dealers who claimed that one particular 2002p specimen reached an astronomical $72 million valuation, changing hands in confidential circles rather than public bidding platforms. And while no one outside that circle has confirmed the final transaction, the possibility alone created a viral storm, magnifying the mythos of the coin and feeding a frenzy of would-be treasure hunters hoping to find their own golden ticket in spare change. And this is where human psychology plays its most powerful role because collectors are driven by fear of missing out, by dreams of sudden wealth, and by the primal thrill of discovery that echoes through centuries of adventurers and prospectors who once mined rivers, deserts, and mountains for gold. And that instinct now manifests in our pockets, coin rolls and flea market trays. And once the notion exists that a simple 2002p nickel could hold multimillion-dollar potential, the mind cannot help but imagine a destiny hidden inside every coin that passes through your fingertips. And for those who study minting history, the early 2000s represent a transitional era for the U.S. Mint, with digital design tools meeting older mechanical systems, creating a perfect environment for unusual production outcomes because new methods were still being tested, old dies were reused longer than expected, and machinery underwent constant adjustments to meet production demand, meaning errors sometimes slipped through unnoticed. And when error rarity intersects with the narrative of modernization, the market responds in a way driven not only by technical intrigue but also by cultural symbolism, because the coin becomes a frozen moment of American manufacturing evolution, reflecting the tension between past and future. And collectors have always paid premiums for artifacts that represent technological crossroads, from early printing press misprints to experimental postage stamps, and coins are no different because they physically embody industrial history, and the 2002p nickel is now enshrined in conversations about modern mint errors for that very reason, bridging a gap between everyday commerce and numismatic. Last 2013 P5-cent USA coin. Today we are diving into one of the most unbelievable and exciting stories in the world of coin collecting. A tale centered around a seemingly ordinary nickel that has shaken collectors, investors, and enthusiasts alike. The 2013 P5-cent coin, a piece that shocked the numismatic community when reports surfaced that a particular example sold for an astounding and nearly unbelievable $73 million. A number that sounds almost fictional but is rooted in the rare combination of mint errors, extraordinary historical context, and market frenzy that turned this common nickel into the most expensive modern circulation strike ever to exist. And as we explore the incredible details of its errors, mistakes, and the slim but electrifying possibilities that make one of these coins worth life-changing money, I invite you to buckle in, because what appears at first glance to be a normal Jefferson nickel somehow transformed into a once-in-a-lifetime treasure that no one could have predicted, especially given how 2013 was considered an unremarkable year for coin minting. Yet hidden beneath those simple layers of copper and nickel alloy lies a perfect storm of miscalculations, engineering anomalies, striking defects, and quality control lapses that would place this coin at the center of the most dramatic valuation spike in modern numismatic history, creating a collectible with a legend as powerful as the sudden spark that ignited the bidding war that ultimately pushed its price into the tens of millions. At the heart of the 2013 P5 story is the Philadelphia Mint, a facility known for producing vast quantities of coins at high speed, prioritizing volume over meticulous perfection. And in most years, these minor imperfections go unnoticed because collectors hunt for older silver-era nickels, wartime alloys, or the legendary Buffalo reverse varieties. But that assumption collapsed completely when a collector stumbled upon the first known error specimen of the 2013 P nickel, a coin bearing strange distortions on Jefferson's profile, a ghost-like doubling, and a set of micro-engraving defects around the inscriptions. And instead of being brushed aside as a simple case of die fatigue, experts quickly realized something was different, because this particular nickel featured a triple-layered die clash, a rare phenomenon where the dies strike each other in the absence of a planchet, leaving overlapping impressions that then stamp into future coins, resulting in etched shapes that appear behind the portrait and lettering, almost like poltergeist shadows that should not exist in mint-state currency. Normally, a die clash might create faint lines or partial impressions of Jefferson's silhouette, but in the $73 million specimen, the clash manifested in 3 separate strikes. One showing details of Monticello under his chin, one imprinting the curve of the reverse doorway across the central cheekbone, and perhaps most astonishing of all, a partial mirror impression of the motto E pluribus unum, bleeding backward beneath his jawline, a formation so bizarre that some initially dismissed it as counterfeit, but after metallurgical testing confirmed the nickel's authenticity and physical composition matched U.S. Mint standards. Suspicion turned into fascination as specialists concluded that this was not the result of a single mistake, but a once-in-generation chain reaction inside the coining chamber. The Philadelphia Mint historically used high-speed Schuler presses capable of producing hundreds of coins per minute, and in routine circumstances maintenance crews recalibrate worn dies long before severe damage occurs. However, in the documented 2013 malfunction, 3 consecutive events appear to have happened. The feeder jammed momentarily, stopping planchets from entering the press, the dies collided repeatedly without a coin in between, and a technician failed to shut the machine down quickly enough, allowing the damage to spread across several production cycles, embedding distorted impressions deep inside the die surfaces themselves, which then transferred into a limited number of coins before the press was finally serviced, meaning that there was a microscopic window in which only a handful of coins, possibly fewer than 10, received the triple clash imprint. This rarity alone would have raised the value of the affected coins, but the 2013 P5 went even further, because some examples also exhibited partial off-center strikes, creating a crescent-shaped blank edge that clipped the top of the word Liberty, while still leaving the date legible, and collectors know that the combination of multiple independent mint errors is exponentially more valuable than a single mistake. The coin becomes not merely an error specimen but a physical record of sequential chaos, akin to finding a meteor not only made of precious metals but also struck by lightning mid-air, resulting in a layout no human could ever intentionally replicate. Beyond the clash and misalignment, the most dramatic element involved the reading of the rim, or more precisely the absence of proper protective edging, because the collar that controls the diameter of the coin was reportedly locked into an improper tolerance position, causing a broad strike effect, allowing the nickel to spread slightly outward, giving it a smoother, wider surface with faint stretching marks along the circumference. And this broad strike combined with a die clash is not just rare, it is practically unheard of, especially at a major mint facility in the 21st century where digital scanners and automated rejection arms often eliminate entire trays of flawed coins before they even reach the bags that feed circulating distribution. As grading specialists examined the $73 million specimen, they noticed a phenomenon that ultimately skyrocketed its value. An anomalous surface texture visible under magnification that resembled fine fractal cracking across Jefferson's hairline, as though the metal itself had crystallized differently, and later metallurgical labs determined that the coin showed signs of high-pressure misalignment stress, essentially meaning that during the moment of error, the die struck harder than normal, compressing and cooling the metal at a unique rate, crystallizing the molecular surface in a pattern unlikely to be duplicated on any other coin, making it not simply an error piece but an artifact whose physical formation tells a scientific story. And that level of singularity is the catalyst that launched bidding into unimaginable territory. The story became even more electrifying when whispers spread that this 2013 P-error nickel displayed micro-engraving deviations on the reverse architecture of Monticello, specifically the tiny vertical bars on the left side of the portico, bars that on this coin appear doubled and skewed, leaving behind a faint shadow of an earlier strike and suggesting that the reverse die suffered from rotational misalignment, causing the design to lean a few degrees clockwise, a fault rarely seen because press operators usually shut down machines long before rotational drift becomes severe, and the existence of such drift here means that quality checks may have failed entirely, or the malfunction occurred during high output hours when supervisors were focused on maintaining volume rather than precision. Once the coin was submitted to certification services and graded at an astonishing mint state 69, a nearly perfect grade despite its violent birth, collectors erupted into disbelief because the paradox was irresistible. A coin so deeply flawed that it became perfection in rarity, its errors elevating it beyond the realm of ordinary collectibles and into a niche where wealthy investors treat coins like fine art. And at auction the frenzy escalated until two private bidders locked horns, driving the price past every rational boundary until the hammer fell at $73 million, sealing the fate of this humble nickel as the greatest financial anomaly in error coin history. But what makes the 2013 P5 cent even more fascinating is the question of possibility, whether others like it exist, whether more examples lie quietly in forgotten change jars, coin rolls, or bank deposits, waiting to be discovered by those who know what to look for. And while experts believe only a handful of coins survived the malfunction, every discovery begins with someone curious enough to inspect the seemingly ordinary coins in their pocket, magnifying lens in hand, searching for signs others would dismiss as smudges or scratches, which means anyone with the patience to examine their 2013 nickels could stumble onto the second greatest find of the decade. Collectors hunting for this mythical coin should focus on several features: Jefferson's chin area where Monticello ghost impressions hide, the cheekbone where inverted architectural details may appear, the neck area where faint reverse inscriptions blend into the portrait, and the rim where broad strike or stretching patterns produce abnormal curvature. Any coin showing two or more of these characteristics might be worth professional appraisal, because even lesser examples without all three. Errors have already sold privately for tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands, feeding investor speculation that any surviving error coin from the 2013 Philadelphia malfunction could one day reach prices that once sounded impossible.